Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We're really grateful to have with us here at Duke Law and at our Wilson Center, Curtis Flowers and Henderson Hill. As many of you watching know, Mr. Flowers, beginning in 1997, was tried 6 times for a crime he did not commit. 2 of those trials ended in mistrials. 4 times his convictions were reversed on appeal, including by the US Supreme Court. He served 20 years in Parchman Prison on death row. 2018, many of you may have listened to it, season 2 of the podcast In the Dark explored the case and brought national attention to the rampant injustices visited upon Mr. Flowers. The charges were finally dropped last September, and we couldn't be more pleased that he can share some words with us today, describe how this happened to him and what life has been like since. We have with us Henderson Hill, currently senior counsel at the ACLU Capital Punishment Projects. He's worked for a decade as a public defender, death penalty attorney, civil rights lawyer. He founded the Center for Death Penalty Litigation here in Durham, co-founded the 8th Amendment Project. He served recently on the North Carolina Governor's Task Force on racial justice and our criminal justice system here in North Carolina. And in 2019, he joined Mr. Flowers' defense team as Mr. Flowers faced a 7th trial. So thank you both for joining us here today. It's really a pleasure to welcome you. And I have some questions I want to ask, but we can keep this free flowing. And I'm sure that many in the audience will have questions. Please, if you do, use the Q&A function, and I'll be scanning to see what kind of questions you have for us as our event goes forward. So welcome.
Thank you, Brandon. It's good to be with you. I know I can speak for Curtis, Mr. Flowers, when I say this is one of his first appearances on this kind of setup. And the butterflies will go away, but he's happy to join and to share his story with you. Curtis?
So maybe I can ask a question that hopefully no butterflies are on this. Maybe you could talk about what your normal life was like before 1997, before you had any reason to think about, who the DA was in Winona, Mississippi. Like what was regular life for you before, six trials ago?
Oh, hanging out with family, having a good time, singing gospel every weekend, and just enjoying life. Yes.
I know you love singing gospel and have for a long time. Are you back singing gospel again today?
Yes, I am. But we don't get to travel as much now due to COVID, so we just come together and just have a good time at home.
And has music and singing always been a part of your life, or is it something, more towards adulthood you started singing more gospel, or?
Yes, I started singing about the age of 10.
Age of 10.
Yes.
That's a great age to really get into music.
Yes, and my dad and I, we still get together from time to time and just sing, whenever I can get that way. Right now it's snowing and ice out there. I can't move right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had the privilege of the full measure of listening to Mr. Archie, Curtis's father, and Curtis harmonize. But I visited the family home in Winona, even while Curtis was still detained. And there was just something special about the spirit of family that enveloped that home. You could see the setting, the household that raised Curtis to be the man that he is, the man he's always been. And that was a man that could not have participated in this crime. What a special family it is, Curtis. And we all wish Miss Lola was here to celebrate with you, but in many ways, she'll always be there with you.
Yes. Yes, my mom, she was my rock. Yeah, we did everything together. My mom, she was the glue to everything. Whether it was family reunions, vacations, just family get-togethers, and she could cook too. Yes, she was a rock. And I do miss her dearly.
Yeah. For folks who haven't been to Winona, what was the town like? Is it kind of
small,
definitely small town?
Yes. Not a whole lot to do. I think if you didn't have family functions, you know, you just be bored all the time. But Winona's a real small place. Yeah.
And so let's turn to the harder things for you to remember and talk about. When did you first hear that this murder of 4 people happened? I'm sure in a small town like that, word traveled fast.
Well, it was the same day. I think around noon, somewhere in there. About 12 o'clock, 12:30, somewhere in there. Yeah, when the officers showed up and let me know that they wanted to talk with me downtown because I used to work there and everything. Mhm. But how can I describe this? At first, I didn't think anything of it. I used to work there. Maybe, they want to know if I know anything or anything like that. But, the more I talk with them, and the more they talk with outside people, then I find out, I was a suspect. Yeah, so, that made my heart drop. Me, a killer, but it was a disturbing thing. It really was. Yeah, because I felt like everybody knew me in Winona.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and that's why I just couldn't understand me being a suspect. Yeah.
And did the officers try to pressure you to confess?
Oh yeah, with a lot of that talking every day, and this person said that what if this person say they saw you here, or this person say they saw you there? I said, well, that would be a lie. Yeah, and they even pressured me to try to say that someone else did it at one point. I said, I just can't say that. They said, well, this person is just willing to say that you did it. I said, well, that's what they make attorneys for. 2 wrongs don't make a right. And we went from there. Yeah.
And Brandon, you asked Curtis, what was Winona like? Yeah. Well, striking was Winona, to me, calls up Fannie Lou Hamer in 1963 when she was stopped at the depot there and put in the Winona County Jail. And it was the violence that was visited on her at that jail that is so reminiscent of the way in which the justice system violated Mr. Flowers' right. This is a hard story to tell. It's a hard story to relive when you talk about the conduct both by the police and the prosecutor against Mr. Flowers. So yeah. Take a couple of deep breaths, Mr. Flowers, as we go through this.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, later as your case goes to trial, you start to hear that these types of rumors, someone claimed he saw this, someone claimed she saw that.
Yes.
That was all I had. That was the case against you.
That was
I mean, what were your conversations like with your lawyer the first time around? You're telling your lawyer, you told everyone that you didn't do this. Exactly. I mean, were you thinking the first time around that, oh, come on, how could they have any evidence? That doesn't make any sense. That for sure the jury will see the light and we have a system of justice in this country. Everything will be okay.
That's how I felt.
Yeah.
That is exactly how I felt. And it seems that, I talked with them every time they wanted to talk. And then it was like when they posted reward money, posters all over the town, it was like people who didn't even know me, knew me then,
Mm-hmm.
I saw him here, I saw him there. And I guess in the end, when no one received the money that I know of, then everybody started recanting the stories and stuff like that, but I had done 20 something years, when all this took place. Yes. But it was nerve wracking. It really was.
So tell us about Jailhouse Informants. So we see so many cases around the country where you have the same thing. Someone in the jail who gets some incentive for telling lies comes forward and said, oh yeah, I heard a confession.
Yeah, now that in itself was painful to watch and hear.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in a courtroom, you're already being judged by a jury, You can't just jump up and say, "Oh, that's a lie," and it was real nerve-wracking to just hear someone, use someone to put someone else away. And I guarantee you, probably 8 times out of 10, he knew it was a lie.
Did you know any of these people who came forward and said, "Oh yeah, I heard him confess. I saw him running away"?
I knew of some.
Yeah.
Yeah, not know him, but I knew of him. Yes, but and I think Odell was someone that I felt they wouldn't believe anyway, because I was on death row. Odell was a state inmate. State inmates are not housed with death row. And so how could he be in a cell close to me and me give a confession to him? Yes. And I didn't understand it. But apparently the jury bought it and I went back to prison, Yes. And I tell him, just sitting there all those years, it really takes a lot out of you, And I think having a loving family that I have, mom who never missed a V-Day, out if she could help it, and just kept me motivated. Yeah, even the times where I wanted to give up, she wouldn't let that happen. Yeah, see, I raised you better than that. And it just kept me strong, kept me going.
If you can, tell us about Parchman Prison.
Oh,
People, I'm sure, have an image in their mind of what it must be like, but I'm sure no one watching this really knows what it's like.
I think I told someone this once before. Parchman Prison is like the worstest dream you ever had, and you double that. I mean, the conditions are bad. Whether it was sewage, I'm talking food. In the summertime, the heat, the mosquitoes, it was just rough. It was just rough. The rats. Parchman is some it's a place that I think should have been shut down. Inmates dying, because not receiving the proper medical care, things like that. I was diagnosed with diabetes while in Parchman. And that in itself was rough on me, because I was in the hospital for like 18 days, came back to the cell, and I think it was like 2 weeks later, I had to go back to the hospital for another 14 days. And it was just rough. It was rough. And being on death row, while you're in the hospital, you can receive no visitation at all, and exercise was hard because of the little pens that they put you in. These are like, I would say something I would build for my dog, to be able to move around in. Just walking around in the pen would get you dizzy because they're that small, and you get to sit out there for about an hour, sometimes an hour. If the officer is ready to sit down and not do anything, they may give you 30, 45 minutes. And that's it. Come back in, you start your shower, where they take inmates to the shower one at a time. When they're done with that, the rest of the day, you just sit in the cell. And I try to occupy my time, like writing letters and watching sports on TV or reading and things like that.
How often could you see your family?
The first and third Tuesday of every month. Yes, from 9 a.m. to 11. Sometimes it ended early if there was commotion or problems. There could be a fight going on somewhere in another building, and all the officers had to rush, so they would end visit, claiming that they had no one to sit over us while they go and handle an emergency. So they would end visit.
Brandon, Parchman Prison is called the penal farm or the plantation.
That's it.
Like 17,000 acres in Sunflower County, Mississippi, the heart of the Delta. So when you're talking about the summer heat or the winter cold, everything is 10 times more extreme in the individual huts called units on that plantation. And that's where the sense of claustrophobia that you can get occurs. It's not, you don't get access to any of that 17,000 acres you're in unit 29, which is dark, ugly, dank, cold, and wet. It's completely inhumane.
Yeah, inmates flooding, just snapping, some not getting the proper medical care, and they're doing things to themselves, and it was just always something, yeah, that would keep you from getting a good night's sleep. But Parchment is a place that I seriously believe need upgraded, because it's rough in there. Now, you have so many inmates who wasn't as fortunate as I am. I mean, don't get it wrong. There's a lot of inmates who I feel should be there or who are guilty, but then there are a lot who were put there uh, wrongfully. I felt, and I think these are cases that really should be looked into. And it's a bad place for anyone, but it should be looked into.
Let's talk a little bit more about how you got there and kept getting put back after one trial, two trials. I mean, twice there's a hung jury and the jury didn't buy it, and there's a mistrial. And I'm interested in why you thought that happened. I mean, with everything that all the power that the law enforcement prosecutor had behind them, twice they couldn't cut it.
Yes, and I felt every time they gave me, whether two times or that we did have mistrial, I felt that they had gave me a impartial juror. Mm-hmm. And I think Mr. Evans knew it too, and he would send me back to the county jail. I would sit there until that next year, and he tried me again. And then I felt that he caught on to what was happening, and then he went again and tried to get rid of all blacks, and they convicted me again. Yeah, because he succeeded at that.
Yeah, let's talk about that jury selection in your case. Eventually the Supreme Court said that Justice Kavanaugh saying it was a relentless, determined effort to rid the jury of black individuals.
Yes.
In this day and age, how did the prosecutors get away with that? It sounds as if it was just blatant, the effort to secure in any way possible like a white only or an almost white only jury. I assume Winona, Mississippi is not a white only town. How are they going about it in the courtroom?
It was sad. I think, from what I experienced and saw, I thought Doug was using every strike he had against African Americans. Mm-hmm. And the only time he couldn't is when he ran out. and it was nerve-wracking to sit there and see all this, and no one stepping in to do anything about it, especially the judge. Mm-hmm. And it was just hurtful. Yes, and I don't know much about the law, but I could just sit there and just see that what he was doing was just clearly wrong. And to see him not be punished for it or corrected in the courtroom was really nerve-wracking. It really was.
I think the number that came up at the Supreme Court was something like 41 out of 42 prospective black jurors in your various trials were excused. So when your lawyer, Sherry Lynn Johnson and Keir Weibel were up at the court arguing that, could you remember just seeing black face after black face being shown the door and wondering whether any African-American was ever going to sit in one of your trials?
Yeah, it was rough. I didn't never think any of them would ever get to sit on that trial. Any of them. And to watch them come into the courtroom one by one and sit on the witness stand and walk out, and you see the DA just use his strikes. Your Honor, I want to strike juror number so-and-so, so-and-so. And I would find the papers and look, and I saw, oh, it's another black juror. Gone. And to see the judge just okay it was really nerve-wracking. It really was. To see my attorneys get up and argue the fact that juror number so-and-so was no different than juror number so-and-so. And just it was hurtful. It really was.
Tell us about, so eventually more evidence comes out, right? That we have these witnesses, jailhouse informants, recanting, talking about a different kind of prosecutorial misconduct, saying that there's pressure put on them to
Yeah.
change their story or to not admit that they didn't really see anything. And so as that evidence starts to come out, including because journalists start to get involved, why do you think the prosecutor still doesn't shake, still doesn't want to give up?
I couldn't understand it. I remember hearing of jurors recanting and stuff like that. I mean, witnesses. It was frustrating, disappointing, and yet I was relieved. That it was happening. I wish it would have been a whole lot sooner, but I was relieved that it was happening. And I think from watching and reading most of the In the Dark reports and stuff like that, things they investigated, and it just came to my conclusion that Doug Evans was just a racist. He just focused on me and locked on to me and would not let go. I think he wanted to hold his position with the townspeople. I don't think he really wanted to look bad before them. And I think that was one of the reasons he stuck with what he had determined for me. He's guilty. And because a lot of people, one owner is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think over 45% Black. And I felt that Doug Evans really did not want the people to think bad of him. And I couldn't blame the victim's family, because Doug Evans had planted in their mind that I was the guy. And it really hurt it. But in another interview, I reached out and I felt sorry for them, and I told them I hope they find the guy that did it, but Curtis Flowers is not the one. Yes, and I couldn't blame him for, oh, he's guilty, because that's the way Doug, told them, and it was really painful. But I think being home and as time went by and this case was dismissed, I can go into Winona and not see a lot of those same hateful faces when they see me. People wave and that's a good feeling. I know there are still some out there who might believe that I'm still guilty, but for the most part, they treat me with respect, and I give it back.
So you mentioned the In the Dark podcast. There probably was no such thing as a podcast when they first tried you for these crimes, right, in 1997. Like, what's a podcast? How did you first hear from the journalists at In the Dark and first start to learn about what they were uncovering in your case?
Well, the first time I heard of them is after they started. I think they had been there almost a year and started uncovering things. And my mom came to visit me one day, and she brought up Madeline Baran, and I said, I've never heard of her. What is I was just like you. What is a podcast? I've never heard of a podcast. Well, she said they are in there, they are investigating this case, and they are uncovering things. And later I received a letter from Madeline letting me know that they are working on my case, investigating. She said someone, to this day, I still don't know. Someone sent her a letter and said, you guys should look into this case. And they did. And she told me they had uncovered so much stuff. And she said, we're just out here seeking the truth. We don't fall one way or the other, but we are doing what we do. And also relieved after getting another visit from my mom. And she said, ooh, let me tell you. She said, they are uncovering so much wrongdoing by the DA and his staff. And it was like a weight had been lifted off me. Now, to me, it's just a matter of time now. Yes, and then my case went back before the U.S. Supreme Court, and to hear that they had overturned it, I just felt like I could breathe again. but then yet I was facing a 7 trial. Yeah, so get into the county jail and sitting there for months, and then judge granting bail. Then I'm placed on house arrest in Texas, where I had to sit. But that was a nice sit, because I take house arrest any day over prison.
That's the truth.
Yes, and then I remember being home, and not too long after that, this pandemic came, and then my brother-in-law, he couldn't go to work every day, so he's sitting in the house with me, and he's complaining, and I'm looking at him smiling, and he said, "Bro, what you laughing at?" I said, "Hey, welcome to the party, pal. I've been doing this for years, so this here is nothing to me." But he, just to watch him not be able to get out and go to work, having to work from home every day, he found that suffering. And then one day we was talking, and he said, "You know what? This morning I was thinking about your situation. In mine, I have no reason to be complaining." Yes. He said, "If you can do this here, no one should be complaining about anything." And we laughed about it, but he was someone I talked with every day. He helped me realize one day. He said, "You still living like you in prison." He said, "I go in your bedroom, you got snacks in there." He said, "The kids right downstairs. You're not locked up anymore. You don't have to live like this." But it was just that mindset, because in penitentiary, you don't take anything for granted. You don't throw away anything. It could be like a noodle seasoning pack. You will hold on to it because you're gonna need it for something. Whether it's a piece of chicken or something called parchment, they don't season anything, because you have a lot of inmates who high blood pressure and stuff like that. So you have to keep these things, to make things cope. Yeah.
Brandon, there's a part of the story that didn't come out in that last conversation. The investigation before the Supreme Court argument probably took 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And by the Mississippi Innocence Project, Mississippi Justice Center, and then the tremendous introduction of the Hogan Lovells team, and the kind of effort they put in, turning over every stone, was just amazing. It included 2 Duke law grads. Jonathan Abram, David Maxwell were heroes in this case, as was the entire team. Yeah. And one thing to say, 6 trials. Curtis had some really tremendous lawyers in each one of those trials. And what was amazing about Curtis's story was that at each point, the DA and his investigators sought to cheat and to keep information from his lawyers and obviously from the jury. But it really is a story of how the justice system broke down, not by accident, not because there wasn't enough money to pay lawyers to represent an indigent person, but by the deliberate intent of the prosecution to cheat and violate the law. And the discrimination of the jurors was only one strategy.
Let's talk about other evidence that was concealed. What role did journalists play in uncovering some of that? What role did some of the attorneys that came in, like the Mississippi Innocence Project, Justice Center, Hogan? Stuff that gets concealed can stay that way.
Your basic tool to discover things is Brady motions, the request of the state for exculpatory evidence. And when you're talking about a client who's never been arrested before, much less arrested for a violent crime, you're going to plow the state with information. Well, who are the other suspects that you have? What about the gun, the weapon? How did we learn about a potential weapon in this case? And the prosecutor had information about other suspects. And as it turned out, what the law firm and other investigators found out is these prospective potential suspects had so much more likely evidence against them than Curtis ever did. But no one looked. And the point of system breakdown is the lawyers would ask in open court for this exculpatory information. And Doug Evans would give a response that was wholly inaccurate. There'd be testimony from the investigative detective, wholly inaccurate, the case detective, wholly inaccurate. So even the efforts of those lawyers in your earlier trials to get at the truth was stopped by the deliberate intentional misconduct of the prosecutor and his investigators. It really is a shameful story. I thought In the Dark did a wonderful job of putting pictures and faces and voices to this. I mean, these young women went out there with cameras and microphones and got the stories in a way in which a dry pleading, an affidavit, a witness statement filed in a court pleading just wouldn't do. And I think the impact of the In the Dark podcast was monumental. It just got people's eyes open. You know, in our visits to Winona, people from both sides of the track had followed the podcast and were willing to engage with us as members of the legal team and share their views across the racial divide that they knew and understood that a misjustice had occurred. None of that would have gotten out simply on the strength of a Supreme Court argument or a well-crafted filing by one of the nation's best law firms. It took that kind of amplification to reach people.
How did that feel to you, Curtis, to all of a sudden hear that these journalists were amplifying your story to like a national audience?
Yes, it felt good. It felt good. I was so thankful for them. To this day, I still am. I thought In the Dark did some awesome work. Things that, like Henderson said, couldn't get done early on, you know, and I don't know a whole lot about them as far as, you know, their personal lives, but as a podcast, investigators, they are awesome. And then they came in and got the job done. And I will forever be grateful for them. They're just awesome.
There was a Mississippi detective, an African-American detective,
Yeah.
who was friendly with Miss Lola. And he committed to Miss Lola not to let go of this bone. He was going to chew on it until the truth came out. And Max Mays was a man of his word. That investigator looked at some of these alternative suspects, uncovered rocks that were not uncovered. And again, that is so much of what informed the work of the law firm in its pleadings and in its work and what came out through the investigation of the journalists. But you know, it's amazing, Brandon, the combination of lawyers, investigators, journalists who tapped into this essential truth of Curtis's innocence and the wrongness of it. I tell Curtis all the time that his case in the Supreme Court is going to be there forever, for a long time. And Winona will have two faces to it, Fannie Lou Hamer and Curtis Flowers, because it's your case is symbolic of what has been wrong with the American justice system, really from the beginning.
Yes.
What did it take, given that seems like the locals were willing to go for a 7th trial? Were you surprised, Curtis, that they did finally say 6 is enough?
Yes, I really was. Because when I came home on bail, well, matter of fact, right before I came home, I met Rob McDuff and Henderson. And, you know, and just talking with them, you know, it was a relief to have such, you know, awesome lawyers for this 7th trial. But I wasn't shocked that they wanted to go back to trial for a 7th time. But after sitting there one night and enjoying myself, me, my brother-in-law, my sister, I received a phone call, and it was the lawyers from Hogan Levels. And Ashley Johnson told me, she said, I got some good news and I got some bad news. She said, which do you want first? I said, let's get the bad news. She said, well, the bad news is that we still don't know who's wearing your name on the back of their helmet in the NFL. She said, now the good news is your case just been dismissed. Oh man, it was, I couldn't breathe for a second, you know, and I was so happy, you know. And I think my sister was, I think I had to stop and take care of her for a second because she was so excited. And we all started popping champagne and having drinks, and it was a glorious moment for me. Yeah, and then to get a call from the monitoring guy for instruction on how to remove the house arrest monitor. Yes, and I felt like I was free for the first time, just being home, but yet walking around with a big old monitor around your ankle. You still felt locked up, but I was just happy to be home. And we re-celebrated and had a good time.
Brandon, you asked what would make the locals want to try this a seventh time. It's important to realize that the decision not to pursue a seventh trial was made by a new attorney general in the state of Mississippi, who brought a level of professionalism and diligence to her investigation and review of this decision. She had just come into office when this was laid on her lap, and the degree of attention and effort and investigation and review of the voluminous materials that her staff undertook was professional and thorough in every respect. And so there's a very big difference between that local authority that made that decision and the DA of Montgomery County, who went back to the well 6 times, finding new ways to cheat every time. 2 very different officers, offices, and approaches.
We have a lot of great questions in the Q&A, and some of them we've kind of already talked about, but one question is right just about this, which is, well, okay, how about accountability for prosecutors who cheat? Is anything going to happen based on all the misconduct that came to light in Winona? I'm sure your case is not the only one. It's not like it's not like they cheated once. There were 6 trials, and a lot of other people had trials during those years. Is there any pressure to pursue some form of accountability?
I believe there should be. And I also believe that every case Doug Evans had ever tried should be looked into. And I guarantee you find something where he has wronged someone in convicting them. Like I said, I've talked about it with certain lawyers about, trying to see if we can't get him somehow, because he need to be pointed. I don't think the state would just take it upon themselves to do it, but I think something need to be done.
And I'll say this, Rob McDuff is one of the most skilled and committed civil rights lawyers in the country. And Hogan Lovells is one of the most extraordinary law firms in the country. And they're both assisting Curtis in the review and the investigation of his options. And I think if there's any collection of lawyers that can deal with the challenges of immunity, absolute immunity, qualified immunity, I feel confident that the lawyers on Curtis's team will bring the appropriate action in the appropriate forum.
And speaking of that, right? So, it's not like when you were released, you're given any compensation by the state or any help. I guess initially you had to pay some funds because you had to pay a bail bonds person, right?
Yes.
you don't get that back, right? And so, is there a path forward in terms of trying to secure compensation for all the years you spent in prison? Is that something that the legal team is still looking at?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll say that one of the good results of the the coverage that the podcast initiated was we had people of goodwill from across the country who were generous in their support, and significant folks who have become friends now of Curtis and his family. But they enabled him to make that bond where there would have been no path forward. And so, yeah, all of us are encouraging Curtis to attend to his health issues. He's learning to live all over again in the 21st. I forget which century we're in, Curtis. I think it's the 21st century, but there's all sorts of technologies here that I'm trying to get used to, and I'm sure are challenging you. But he's got a group of friends and supporters, both from the legal team and just folks of goodwill who have come to learn his story. I tell Curtis of Daryl Hunt, who Duke awarded an honorary degree to 2012. I recall being there when Daryl got that award. It was just a representation of the community appreciation of the experience he went through and the grace with which he came through and sought to help others. And I see in Curtis much of that same commitment to service and to community and to spread love. And it's just a remarkable genuineness to be in touch with. Thank you for that, Curtis, always.
Thank you. Yes. But yes, I am working, we're in the process of starting a foundation. It's called the Curtis Flowers Foundation, where we will be helping, law students get enrolled into good colleges. We want to later venture out and start helping inmates who are in the same situation I was, afford good attorneys, investigators, and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see the work that you do. It's not everyone that is thinking in their transition back to the community. What can I do? What can I do for the community? That's a real special mission you have set out for you there.
Yes, I would hate to see anyone go through what I went through. And so I want to do something to help.
Well, I hope our listeners, viewers today think about the Curtis Flowers Foundation when they're thinking about who to support. We have a bunch of other really, really important, great questions. And one question for you, Mr. Flowers, is, what advice do you have for others who are still incarcerated and fighting a similar battle behind bars? What would you say to someone who is still on the other side?
To stay strong and never give up. Never give up. Don't allow yourself to become institutionalized, as we call it, where you start to eat, sleep, and think prison all the time, getting caught up in the everyday stuff that goes on in prison. You gotta separate yourself from that. I was there, I pretty much kept to myself unless I was talking to someone immediately around me. There were times where I came out for visitation. I walked by someone's cell and, hey man, you act like you just too good for everybody else. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. When I come by you, I acknowledge you. And that's it. Because we're on two different paths. I'm trying to get out that door. You done settled, and I can't make you follow me. And I'm sure not going to let you take me down that road with you. But you just got to stay away from it. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Yes, and just stay strong. Never give up. Got to stay positive.
Another great question we had is that, sometimes when people hear about a trial being reversed, they say, oh, it must have been a legal technicality. Mm-hmm. But here there's no evidence linking you to the crime, no real evidence. And so how do we turn the narrative around and explain to people the role that racial bias and misconduct plays in convictions like yours? How do we get people to understand that it's not just legal technicalities? There can be something seriously wrong and racist with a criminal conviction.
That is a good question, though.
Maybe your story is
Well,
Exhibit A, maybe.
well, we're glad, Curtis, that there are folks like the good people at Duke's Innocence Project that are that are doing exactly that. You know, Curtis is now one of, I don't know, over 170 people who have been exonerated from death row, and
It's
the
actually,
pattern.
it's over 180 as of today. There's just a new report as of today from the Death Penalty Information Center uncovering 11 more death row
Wow,
exonerations. So it's a lot of people.
look at that. I mean, the patterns are there, and it falls. The reasons fall in different buckets. Some of it's race, some of it's the discrimination in juries. Some of it is just the awful level of investigation that occurs, particularly with Black defendants, and for that matter, Black homicide victims. And so these disparities are hard to uproot, but I think what we can do is publicize, give the public more information. The recent racisroots.org webpage by CDPL is very helpful. The Death Penalty Information Center is putting out information on a daily basis that journalists and others amplify. So I think people are learning, and Curtis's story is just that kind of thing that might open people's eyes and ears to it, because there's nothing like making the personal connection between someone who's been victimized by institutional and specific racist conduct. And we can look at Curtis's story and find level after level of that kind of misconduct and abuse. So Curtis, I'm glad you're getting over the nerves. I mean, you're doing really well. You know, the butterflies have not controlled. And this is the story that so many more people need to hear.
Yes.
Another great question we got, because it'd be pretty understandable for someone who's been through what you've been through to be consumed by anger. And everything you've described as a life of grace, even on death row. And so one question is, well, how do you move forward with your life without anger?
Well, I was, everything I've ever taught in life, you know, you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You don't walk around with no grudge on your shoulders, you know, and stuff like that. I tell everyone, you know, when all this took place, you know, and coming home, you know, I was disappointed, but I'm the type, I won't hate you. I won't feel like I need to do something to you. You know, it's okay to hate a person's ways, but and yet not hate the person, you know. I was raised that way, you know, and my mom, dad always instilled on us, you know, we was a church going family, you know, raised up, you know, having Bible study and things like that, you know, and these type of things, they really help me, you know, and I just try not to think negative. Always get up every day and think positive, you know, I get the word in, a word of prayer, and just move on. Just move on. You know, because it's different when you're locked up and can't get away from negative stuff. But being out in the world, no one should have to suffer from negative stuff. You have every right to move away from it. Stay away from it. Yeah, and that's me. Yes, and that's how I carry myself.
Another great question we had is, well, for our students, for our alums, for what can lawyers do? Obviously, you benefited from some real remarkable lawyering over the years, and in your case alone shows what work lawyers can do at law firms, at innocence projects, at nonprofits. Henderson, do you want to share some additional thoughts too on what our larger legal community can do to band together to work to remedy injustices, prevent ongoing patterns of misconduct, free the innocent, fix the system?
Yeah. Well, I think we're at a time when more and more people are asking that question. And I think it's time to stop looking for the very small tweaks I mean, the system is really in dire need of transformation. And, you know, Curtis's story is special because it's connected with innocence. And the stories of 180 other people exonerated are special because they involve innocent people. But in North Carolina, there are 4,000 people serving life sentences in prison. There are 34,000 citizens in prisons. People are being locked up and keys are thrown away for decades at a time with no sense to how that is helpful to the individual, to the family, or to the community. I mean, I think we need to recognize that our penal system is a direct outgrowth of the period of enslavement and of racial oppression that followed with Black codes, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration. And it will take a transformation of that system to bring equity to it. We're arresting too many people. We're arresting too many people because of the color of their skin or their economic circumstances or the zip codes they live in. You know, we're consigning them to incarceration for decades at a time where the sentence is not connected to an appropriate value system that a good goal is being served. And we're not identifying, you know, generations of traumatized individuals and families that are excluded from any service by our justice system. So I thought that in North Carolina, Curtis, the governor took note of these large problems and started a process to help address it. We need to encourage that process to continue and to demand of that process some significant articulable steps that are addressed to transformation. So I look at the Duke community and to the law profession more broadly and say, we've got a very special burden to help with that transformation and that change. And we as a profession need to commit ourselves to doing that. And many of the lawyers and nonprofits that have been associated with Curtis's case are centrally involved in that process. And, you know, we should find ways of supporting them.
We have a lot of work to do right now, but it does feel like we have a head of steam.
Yep.
And people are talking about problems like sentencing and pretrial detention and length of sentences. COVID has shed some new light on why do we have people locked up when our pandemic epicenters are our jails and our prisons. So I hope we can make a lot more progress in states like Mississippi, North Carolina, Illinois, every state, and maybe some federal progress now too. And there's a lot that non-lawyers can do as well, obviously, whether it's working with lawmakers, calling your lawmaker. Local elections matter a lot. It matters a lot who the prosecutor is in Winona, Mississippi. I think, right, the prosecutor that went after you 6 times would have done a 7th, right, ran unopposed in the last election. And so politics matters, and the work that we can do supporting nonprofits, supporting investigative journalism, supporting research.
Brandon, that point that you made that non-lawyers need to be brought into the process, you know, one of the remarkable and I think the best parts of the governor's task force was to expand it, the membership beyond lawyers, beyond law enforcement, to include you know, regular businessmen, you know, teachers, regular folk who had lots to contribute, but also had a lot to learn about how the system operated. And once they learn, eyes open, people get energized and they want to participate in the change and in the transformation. So I think a good part of what needs to be done is breaking out of the legal courthouse silo and getting other elements, as you hinted at, as you described, getting other folks involved in the conversation beyond the legal profession.
Great. We can go a little bit longer if you're okay with that. We do have a whole big group of questions that has come in, and another really great question that one of our viewers asked was, we heard about how you got no support really, except from family, from friends, from people who are concerned about your case. You got no support from the state when you were released. If the state was doing it right, what sort of resources do you wish you had to help return to life in the community?
I would say some type of, I think, when state inmates are released from prison, they go to what they call a pre-release, where they taught to adapt back into society,
Mhm.
and I even think they are given some type of what do you call it, where they receive a certain amount of funds, to help adjust back into the free world. I think that same thing should apply for someone who has been on death row for 20-something years. It's a hard process. Let me tell you a funny moment. I was released on house arrest and left Mississippi, went to Texas, and along the way, when we first got into a certain part of Texas, we stopped at a restaurant. I was in the restroom, then used the urinal, and I stepped back looking for a handle to pull, because that's how it was before I went in, And I stood, everybody kept coming about, just step away. I said, no, it's rude to, do this and just walk away, He said, everybody just step away. And I stepped back and the thing flushed itself. So I walked back up and I'm looking, trying to see why it flushed itself. Now I wash my hand, I go back out into the restaurant part. And as I pass by tables, everyone is laughing. I think the guys went back and told their wives. And one lady told me, she said, sir, it's going to be all right. You've been away for a while. and it was a funny moment. And it was just readjusting. I couldn't even pump gas because I didn't know how to operate the gas pump. But I'm slowly adjusting, and I think another funny moment was someone gave me an iron to iron a pair of pants. There was this much cord hanging out the back of the iron. And I said, now, how can I use this? Someone told me, just pull the cord. I said, I'm not going to tear the iron up. So just pull the cord. And I pulled the cord, and the cord just started coming out of the iron. And that was another funny moment right there. I said, the last time I saw something like this, it was on a vacuum. It was a funny moment, but I'm adjusting. I am adjusting, and all these new technologies has really got me, every day you're learning something. Yes.
Brandon, I should say that Rob McDuff has been in serious conversation with the Attorney General about the state's position on statutory compensation.
Yeah.
And so the signs are very good that the state will take the appropriate and reasonable position with respect to Mr. Flowers' right to statutory compensation.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, it has been a good change that more states now have something in place. It may not be what you could get in a federal civil rights lawsuit, but they have something in place.
Right.
If you can show you were wrongly convicted. So speaking of modern technology and the podcast, Henderson, do you have any advice about how one of our listeners asked, to get national media attention for a wrongful conviction case? Like what's the secret? It sounds like it was in the dark, happened because they just came across it, and there was no secret. It was happenstance, and that your case was so problematic, it caught their eye, and then their eye never left. But any thoughts on how do you get people to focus on a case when there's so many injustices?
I'm pleased that you would think enough of me to ask me that question. I'm amazed by the power of social media and by the power of podcasts to communicate and by the millions. And I think one fortunate thing we have is, as the community of folks grow that are concerned with the need to transform, it includes non-lawyers. It includes writers. It includes digital specialists and media persons. And there's something about the genuineness of Curtis's story. There's something about the heart compelling story of a 17-year-old girl who's ripped away from a 1-year-old baby and sentenced to 20 years on a drug charge. First offense, least culpable person. I mean, to get stories like that in the social media, to point that attention to the appropriate authorities is something that, you know, when I first started as a defense lawyer, you know, nearly 40 years ago, there's no capacity. You know, it was only the people at the courthouse who saw the miscarriages. Now, there's almost always somewhere you can go to get a story amplified and get it to into the broader community. And I think that's a real benefit. I mean, we have now the capacity to expand our community. And it shouldn't be that only lawyers and cops and judges are the ones that know what goes on in the courthouse. And of course, now that we have a better, much more sophisticated sense of how people survive trauma, we shouldn't only be directing resources to people brought into the system. There's a whole swath of our community out there whose experiences with trauma are not being addressed. And that leads to educational and social problems that all bubble up. I think for the first time in my consciousness, we have larger groups of people asking the right questions and looking for real substantial answers. So I tend to be more hopeful and optimistic that we're going to get broader community support and that it will cut through some of the partisan stuff that's dividing us on too many issues.
Well, I never thought I would see the day when Virginia would abolish the death penalty. It was second to Texas in executions. And I started off as a law professor in Virginia studying the decline in death sentencing. But I never thought that decline would lead to abolition. But then again, cases like yours, Mr. Flowers, you know, when people see how badly even a death penalty case where everyone should be focused on getting it right, it's a murder, it's a really serious case. I think that has really changed some minds. But also the misconduct that goes into death sentences. It's, you know, I never thought I would see that day. It sounds like any day now we may see the governor of Virginia sign the legislation for a southern state to abolish the death penalty.
That was unthinkable. Certainly 15 years ago it was unthinkable, but going back 20, 30 years, it was not in anyone's conversation. Like you said, Virginia was neck and neck with Texas in terms of how quickly they could kill folks off the road.
Well, Curtis, I hope you are willing to lend your voice to some of these efforts to change practices in Mississippi and around the country. I think you're, you know, you're inspiration to all of us who care deeply about these issues, but you're an inspiration to people who are learning about these injustices for the first time. And I hope you never did give up, and I hope you keep that love and passion for justice going forward. And just can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today. And thank you, Henderson. We hope you come back to meet our students in person someday and stay in touch, and anything that we can do to help your work with your foundation. Certainly us at Duke Law School, at our Wilson Center, which works on reform of the criminal system. We should also thank the Black Law Students Association at Duke, the Science and Society at Duke, Duke Law Federal Society, the Criminal Law Society. So a whole series of really wonderful groups at Duke all banded together to support this event. And we just can't thank you enough.
I thank you all. And I would love to come meet you all in person. I really would.
Before too long, we hope.
And I would love being a big voice to help whatever's going on to make a change. I really would.
I'm so proud of you, Curtis. I love you as a friend, as a client. Take good care.
All right. I love you all.
Thank you, Brandon, for having us.
Thank you so much. Take
Thank you,
care.
Brandon. Yes. Thank you for having us.